Matthew 7:15-28 Tree and its fruit.
Watch out for false prophets. They come to you in sheep's clothing, but inwardly they are ferocious wolves. By their fruit you will recognize them.
Do people pick grapes from thorn bushes or figs from thistles?
Likewise, every good tree bears good fruit, but a bad tree bears bad fruit. A good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. Every tree that does not bear good fruit is cut down and thrown into the fire. Thus, by their fruit you will recognize them. Jesus explained further, ferocious wolves means dangerous swindlers. In the future, many of my own disciples will become false prophets or ferocious wolves. These false disciples of mine can swindle you of all your money to enrich themselves and reduce you to a beggar by the roadside. They don't care about the sheep at all. They swindle you of all your money by encouraging you to pay tithes and give all those sacrificial offerings as stipulated under the Old Covenant, which are obsolete, null, and void, as they had been fulfilled by me. By their fruit you will recognize them means you can recognize them by examining the bad work they do.
Matthew chapter 15 verse 14 Blind guides of the blind.
Jesus continued, a false prophet is also similar to a blind guide of the blind. And if a blind man guides a blind man, both will fall into a pit.
Matthew chapter 13 verses 24-30 The parable of the weeds.
Jesus told them another parable. The kingdom of heaven is like a man who sowed good seed in his field.
But while everyone was sleeping, his enemy came and sowed weeds among the wheat and went away.
When the wheat sprouted and formed heads, then the weeds also appeared. The owner's servants came to him and said, Sir, didn't you sow good seed in your field?
Where then did the weeds come from?
An enemy did this, he replied.
The servants asked him, Do you want us to go and pull them up? No, he answered, because while you are pulling the weeds, you may root up the wheat with them.
Let both grow together until the harvest. At that time I will tell the harvesters, first collect the weeds and tie them in bundles to be burned, then gather the wheat and bring it into my barn. Jesus said, This is what the parable means.
Jesus in heaven, talking with an angel. Angel said, Lord, as you can see, the pastor of that church is a child molester.
So why don't you just close down his church? Jesus said, I can't just close down his church because there is too much at stake. Angel said, What do you mean too much at stake? Jesus said, If I just close down that church, the faith of those members of the congregation who are good and righteous people may be jeopardized. Angel said, What do you mean jeopardized? Jesus said, If I just close down the church, they may lose faith in me. So it is better that we wait until harvest time. Angel said, What do you mean by harvest time?
Jesus said, By harvest time, I mean the day when people die. On the day when some of the church members or pastors die, my angels will put the wheat that is the good and righteous people in the barn, which is heaven, and the weeds that is the wicked and bad people, including bad pastors, will be thrown into the fire, which is hell. Matthew chapter 25 verses 31-46 The sheep and the goats.
When the Son of Man comes in his glory, and all the angels with him, he will sit on his throne in heavenly glory. All the nations will be gathered before him, and he will separate the people one from another as a shepherd separates the sheep from the goats. He will put the sheep on his right and the goats on his left.
Then the king will say to those on his right, Come, come, take you are blessed by my Father. Take your inheritance, the kingdom prepared for you since the creation of the world. For I was hungry, and you gave me something to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me something to drink. I was a stranger, and you invited me in. I needed clothes, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you looked after me. I was in prison, and you came to visit me. Then the righteous will answer him, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you something to drink? When did we see you a stranger and invite you in, or needing clothes and clothe you?
When did we see you sick or in prison and go to visit you?
The king will reply, I tell you the truth. Whatever you did for one of the least of these brothers of mine, you did for me.
Then he will say to those on his left, 'Depart from me, you who are cursed, into the eternal fire prepared for the devil and his angels.
For I was hungry, and you gave me nothing to eat. I was thirsty, and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger, and you did not invite me in. I needed clothes, and you did not clothe me. I was sick and in prison, and you did not look after me.' They also will answer, 'Lord, when did we see you hungry or thirsty, or a stranger, or needing clothes, or sick, or in prison, and did not help you?' He will reply, 'I tell you the truth. Whatever you did not do for one of the least of these, you did not do for me.'
Then they will go away to eternal punishment, but the righteous to eternal life." Jesus said in this parable, the sheep are good people and the goats bad people. In the context of the church, the sheep can represent good shepherds and the goats bad shepherds. The good shepherd takes good care of his sheep and the bad shepherd don't.
Matthew chapter 13, verses 1 to 9, the parable of the sower. That same day Jesus went out of the house and sat by the lake.
Such large crowds gathered around him that he got into a boat and sat in it, while all the people stood on the shore.
Then he told them many things in parables, saying, "A farmer went out to sow his seed.
As he was scattering the seed, some fell along the path, and the birds came and ate it up. Some fell on rocky places where it did not have much soil.
It sprang up quickly because the soil was shallow.
But when the sun came up, the plants were scorched and they withered because they had no root. Other seed fell among thorns, which grew up and choked the plants. Still other seed fell on good soil where it produced a crop, 160 or 30 times what was sown."
He who has ears, let him hear."
Mark said, "Hold it right there, Lord. You said that the birds came and ate it up? Who are those birds?" Jesus answered, "Those birds are Satan." A possible illustration of this can be done with this story.
There was once a first-time believer in me and a pastor or shepherd who is a money grabber, or shall I say, a conman preacher or a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Now this first-time believer attended one of this pastor's Bible study sessions, and during this session this was what took place. Pastor said to the first-time believer, "I have been observing you, and I noticed that you don't put any money into the offering bag at all during every Sunday service. Do you know that you have to pay tithe? You should also be a cheerful giver.
You should give as much as you can every Sunday, including the tithes, so that with this money I can then do my work efficiently to propagate the gospel, and also to finance my many projects." Jesus said, so this first-time believer put a lot of money into the offering bag every Sunday until he became completely bankrupt.
At that time the economy became bad, and this first-time foolish believer lost his job. So he called up his pastor, or so-called shepherd, and asked him for help, and if possible to return the money he had foolishly given to the church or the pastor. But the pastor replied to him in this way, "I am sorry, I can't help you or return back the money to you because there is no proof that you had given any money.
Moreover, you haven't been coming to church lately, and you should ask somebody to get you to church now."
Jesus said, so this poor lad realized instantly that he had been duped by this pastor or so-called man of God, and that this pastor was just a sweet-talking conman. He instantly lost faith in me due to this conman disciple of mine.
This is what I mean when I said the birds came and ate it up.
Mark asked, "So you are saying that in the future, some of your disciples can also go bad and be controlled by the devil and become like those birds?"
Jesus answered, "Yes, that is why I told the whole world to beware of false prophets or false disciples of mine, who are actually wolves in sheep's clothing."
Jesus continued, "The seed that fell on rocky soil can represent those disciples of mine, whose faith in me is not very deep.
At first they get along fine, but they wilt as soon as they have problems, such as when they discovered that they do not make much money being a pastor or disciple of mine.
As a result, they forget their sole function, that is to be a servant of the rest, and that they must forget self and carry their cross. So eventually their faith in me diminishes, and they become worthless shepherds. The seed that fell on thorny ground can represent a disciple of mine who have gone bad. Due to the worries of this life and the lure of wealth, He thinks of ways and means to extract as much money as possible from any sheep that comes to his church to enrich himself. He always used the Old Covenant stories. So, in the end, his church members desert him when they find out that he is not only a money-grabbing preacher, but also a worthless shepherd.
So as a result, he produces no crops or his church membership dwindles.
The seed that fell on the good soil can represent a good pastor or disciple of mine. He is caring and trustworthy with the money that he collects every Sunday, and he never refuses to help any sheep who requires his help. As a result of his good deeds, he shines before men and his church grows.